Hello and good morning to all. This is the 5th series of the SDG Local Solutions. It's the first time that we organize one of these webinars with our partner Metropolis. And today we are here to speak about how to make caring cities projects a reality. We talk about how city cares about their citizens, how there is more and more political decisions about how to include all, to leave no one behind, which is the core principle of Agenda 2030. And we are here today with two local experience to showcase how this meeting and this can be a reality. Just a little bit of logistics first. We have interpretation. On a la interpretación en français. Tenemos interpretación al español.
You have to select interpretation in the lower part of the screens.
These were instructions for French speakers.
So we are recording this video. We will edit it and then upload it in our YouTube channel. And then we want to invite all participants to make questions over the chat. We will be monitoring the chat regularly, and I will be helping our moderator today with your questions. If we have time, we can also bring you on the meeting as speakers if you request to do so. So please, for the moment, use the chat freely to introduce yourself, to make any questions and any comments. We have today our moderator, Julia Monroe. She's the policy officer at Metropolis, and she's following very carefully all that is caring cities, gender issues, and all this new economy of care that is more and more popular and more generates interest in our cities and our partners. So I'm going to leave her to conduct the interview. And just allow me to introduce our partners today, our presenters. We have Véronique Petot. She is the delegate in the Canton Genève for caregivers at the Department of Social Cohesion. Thank you, Véronique, for being with us. And then we have Claudia Mirta Luna, who is the project supervisor at the Global Mayors Challenge in Bogotá Municipality. So without further ado, I'm just reminding the participants to make questions in the chat. I leave the session with you, Julia. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Diana, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's a privilege to be here with you today. So I'm coming from Metropolis, which is a global network of the world's largest cities. It brings together over 150 member cities, 700 million inhabitants worldwide, and it's a hub where metropolises can share solutions and mobilize on issues related to sustainability, social cohesion, gender equality, etc. And it's really excellent to be here today discussing how we can make caring cities a reality, as we've seen in our Metropolis members a growing interest from cities around the world as to how local governments can bring care more to the agenda. And we've also seen a trend of how cities are leading the way on the agenda for care from the local to the global level. For instance, we've seen this with Mexico City, where the debates within the local level took on so much importance that it became a national debate. And thanks to the leadership in Mexico City, it brought this to the UN to create the International Day of Care and Support, which was first celebrated last year on the 29th of October, which really shows the local to global connection that cities have. So within Metropolis, we're supporting local care agendas in 3 ways, and I'll just go through them very quickly. The first is to promote debate and awareness. So in terms of, we have a care campaign and we host dialogues and exchanges. Then through policy exchanges and practices. So for instance, this month and next month, we're holding an intimate exchange between cities on the topic of care, bringing together directors from the Middle East and Latin America and Eurasia to discuss more closely their understandings and policies around care and planning for caring cities. And thirdly, through resource mobilization. So as Metropolis has been working with cities for the last 40 years, we're really acutely aware of how resources are such a challenge for cities. So we're collaborating with donors and partners to develop and implement the first global care fund for cities to support cities in fostering care for carers, enabling communities to care for themselves, and creating more equitable and inclusive cities. So today we have with us 2 cities from different regions of the world tackling this topic of care and caring cities. And I'm going to hand over first to Véronique Pétoud, who, as Diana mentioned, is the cantonal delegate for caregivers in the Department of Social Cohesion of Geneva Canton. We're very excited to have you today, and I'm going to hand over to you to share your experience of Geneva. Véronique.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the perspective of our canton in Geneva, because I am going to provide a presentation on the strategy. And if you have questions on the project or specific aspects, I will be available for you and glad to answer your questions. So can you see my presentation? I have just shared my screen. So I would like to start my presentation with this cartoon, which was very successful in 2020. It was a cartoon or an animation that was very useful, and it was launched during the COVID pandemic, and it showed, well, what happens when you need to be a caregiver. And well, even though people had to stay at home during this period, that was a very useful project. So, well, for the past 10 years, Geneva has put in place a policy for caregiving and a policy for caregiving, and it has inscribed in the constitution the aid for the caregivers. So in 2017, we started the first 4-year project between 2017 and 2020. Then during COVID, we started this function that I'm carrying out right now. I am the cantonal delegate. This is a role that I'm fulfilling right now. And in 2021, we launched a piece of legislation with regard to in-home support. We also inscribed the importance of the caregiver. And also we started a commission of experts so as to follow up on all of these policies and carrying out the actions that were specific to caregivers. Between 2021 and 2023, we consolidated the actions that we implemented during a first phase, and during the year 2023, there were new elections that took place, and with these elections that took place, we created the Office for Caregivers. So this Office of Caregivers was included in the Social Services Department, and we carried out or we started a new plan that will stay in place until 2028. So this is like the timeline. Well, this is a fountain that is illuminated towards the end of October, the 31st of October. That's the Day of Caregivers. So this fountain is illuminated, is lighted up so as to pay homage to the caregivers. This is 31st of October. So, well, these are the most recent figures. 1 person out of 4 is a caregiver in Switzerland. So that represents around 1.4 million people. So if we consider people between 15 and 64 years old, and if we also consider people that are 15 and over that age, there are 1.9 million people that are caregivers in Switzerland. So this graph shows that we took into account the figures from 2012 and 2017, and you can see the comparison. And now we do not have the figures for 2022. Well, the figures for 2012, it's not because there were fewer caregivers. The thing is that the questionnaires that were shared each year, 2012 and 2017, were different. So we have a study that succeeded in showing that 10% of kids and adolescents between 10 and 15, 10% of this teenage population are caregivers, and they are at risk of becoming school dropouts. So last year we launched a specific action for that was mainly oriented, that was mainly targeted on younger people, on kids and adolescents. So at Geneva, we created the Agency for Caregivers, so the Caregiver Agency. This is an agency that brings together all the services with everything that has to do with caregiving. There is a telephone contact, there's also an email address, and well, we receive specific demands through this telephone number. So this is sustained by a commission, this agency or this office that we created as part of our piece of legislation on in-home support. So this is composed of representatives from communes or subsidized organizations and associations. We also have strategic partnerships as well. And there's our office or our agency encourages caregivers to participate in policy creation as well. The objectives of this office, well, basically, it is to answer to the growing needs of our population of caregivers, reinforcing coordination, having greater efficiencies with everything that is created in the communes, in the associations, in the different institutions, and so that we might be able to power all of the projects that are currently in place, and also to create a special space so that caregivers may have a place where they may receive individual support or collective support with awareness raising actions. So we are also creating this special space. We have also taken into account the diversity of situations so as to respond to all types of caregivers and all the different situations that care receivers may be faced with. And the goal is to create different institutions and hospitalization institutions, among other stuff.
The support given to caregivers takes different forms. So first, they need to have information regarding their rights. We have trainings dedicated to creating awareness for voluntary workers and for caregivers. We provide also individual support and collective support to prevent the problems that may appear. And in the Canton of Geneva, there are situations and, for example, people who take care of all sorts of situations, and also those who focus specifically on the illness that the care receiver may have. And when you are a caregiver, it's very important to have a respite care system in place to avoid burnout and other problems in the caregivers. Our goal is to support, to accompany, to do attentive listening, to provide guidance and advice and support, and also provide information on the services available and provide this accompaniment to the caregivers and the people giving support. What we are doing now is finishing the roadmap for caregiving between now and 2028 for the canton. And so in this roadmap, we have 3 pillars. We have the governance pillar, which has different measures, including the cantonal plan. The other pillar is the cantonal statute. And this is a system, and each canton is going to take care of the caregivers so that they can establish very clearly what they can do and also facilitate their access to the services also for caregivers that live in other cantons. So we're trying to create a cantonal statute. It has not been fully developed yet. It's in process, and it really focuses on each situation. If they're caring for an elderly, for a person who is handicapped, a person with a disability, etc. And so all of this improves the quality of the services provided, and we provide also support for the different situations that may appear. And this way they can profit from everything that the system offers, and we avoid burnout. We also have a project in Geneva, in university hospitals in Geneva, to better support caregivers when the care receiver is hospitalized. So there is a whole project to implement this since January, and we're going to publish results next year. At the level of information and communication, which is the third pillar, we're going to implement communication plans per type of population. So this special communication plan for youth, a special communication plan for the larger audience, for professionals, and especially a communication plan for employers with information in the form of videos or other forms of learning, so that employers can really incorporate this knowledge, and also to provide the caregiver, for example, with 10 days of vacation because of their situation. And a very important thing is to say that employers are not fully familiar with this action yet. And so we need to promote this law, and we need to provide support as well, so that they can really be responsible in the companies. And so to make sure that they want to show, you know, like corporate social responsibility, for the company to show that they care about these things. With the governance pillar, I mentioned a few things already, but it is a very ambitious project. When we see what all of the things that accompany the policy and the implementation of measures and actions, and what each institution must do. You have the slides, so I'm not going to read the full text, but you will receive the slides. We also have pillar B, or axis B, and it is very important to mention that this is part of the law and part of the cantonal statute. It's very important to work on the new laws and the new rights that exist within the canton, because this will give the caregiver the possibility of accessing different services depending on their situation, and certain advantages regarding the services provided, or even financial support.
Good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm experiencing some issues with my camera. I haven't been able to turn it on, but I think that Veronique's presentation has been incredibly interesting, and I have a question regarding the focalization process. How do you address the population? Is it open for everyone? Is it open for everyone who needs this system, or how do you address the people that need it?
At the level of the surveys, we conduct many surveys, or we try to identify who needs our services in Geneva. This we did the first year. The first year we launched a survey at the level of department. It was 9,000 people that were above 55 years of age, to identify the needs of seniors. This was the first thing we did, of retired people, yes, senior citizens. So we use this information, and we added other questions. So we added the question of whether they received services by a caregiver, and a little more information. In other surveys, we had a national health survey in all of Switzerland, yes, in all of the territory of the country, and we do this every 4 years, a national health survey. So every 4 years, what I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, 2012, 2017, it's every 5 years, I'm sorry. So when we conduct these surveys, we have to wait until the results are ready, and that's where and we will start analyzing the information from the 2022 survey this year. So I contact the caregivers through the institution if there are any work groups, and then we receive questions from people, and certain issues are, anyone that asks me a question over email, they send me emails with questions. In general, these are people who ask me I don't know, about the services available. And in general, these questions are mostly related to financial support. And I use this as information. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Because what I wanted to know if this was open to everyone or if it was focused on one particular group. And I think that through the service that you use, you are constantly updating the information to reach the population that actually needs these services. So yes, thank you very much.
So I must admit, last year we did a survey on young people to organize a little bit better the service that we were going to provide, and especially for young people who were providing care. And when these caregivers were young, they needed many, many things. And through the surveys, we had a premise, which was to do like the sampling, and we launched certain what we called panels, and they were focused on this population. So that's how the focalization took place. So we did first on seniors, and then the first answers were used to repeat these surveys and go fine-tune the process so that we can have more concrete numbers and everything that happens in our canton. And we focalize it in our canton, so because all of Switzerland has different characteristics. So we really tried to focalize it by including other aspects that were analyzed, and it wasn't just, you know, it's not the same in Geneva that in the center of Switzerland.
Thanks, Veronique. So I'm now going to hand over to Claudia to share her presentation of the work and experience of Bogota in terms of care.
Good morning to everybody. I'm the supervisor of the home care program that is being implemented in the city of Bogota, Colombia. This program is focused on caretakers and people with disabilities above 18 that require high levels of support. All this in the framework of the care district system. Bogota is one of the main cities in Latin America in establishing the care system for the caretakers. This model aims at achieving gender equality and opportunities, offering a range of services and opportunities in the framework of the care district system that is based on 3 goals: recognize, redistribute, and reduce the non-remunerated care work. And since 2020, we've been implemented 23 care blocks, which are existing infrastructure in each one of the locations where we offer services for caretakers and people with disability. However, there are certain territories that did not have that infrastructure. They were remote areas or rural areas. So we implemented another system, the care buses, that offer a more limited range of services, but they provide services for caretakers and the care receivers. And in the year 2023, we implemented the home care program financed by Bloomberg Philanthropies in the framework of Global Mayor's Talent deployed by UNDP. Which is the problem that we want to solve? The basic problem here is the poverty of time of women, which is the structural cause of gender inequality. The burden of non-remunerated care is on women, reaching very alarming figures, disproportionate one. Bogota has around 8 million people. 50% of that population are women, and 30% account for female caretakers that are non-remunerated full-time. 90% of them are of low income, 33% have no time for self-care, and 70% have not studied beyond secondary school. That's why, as from the year 2020, in the past administration, they implemented the Bogota care system with different care modalities, the care blocks and the care buses in order to confront these challenges. But in spite of that, the district identified that within that 30%, that 1.2 million caretakers, women, there is a 14% of women who cannot have access to the buses or the blocks because they are spending a lot of time to the care work, and it has to do with the person they take care of, which is a person with disability. That's why we made an additional effort to reach that group of people, those caretakers, with a door-to-door care service. So which are the goals that we address in terms of sustainable development? Number one, to put an end to poverty in all its forms. 5, achieve gender equality and empower women and girls. And 10, reduce inequality between and within countries. The solution, so, is to implement home care program that tries to survey and relieve the caretakers of the overburden of care, while a professional is taking care of the person with disability. This caregiver can do another activity. We reach every one of the homes with 4 services: home care service that aims at the reduction, because a person comes to take care of the person with disability, so the caretaker will have a lower burden of care. Second, certification of knowledge. This is the recognition of the empirical knowledge of the caretaker with an agreement of the Secretariat of Women, certifying that allows them in the medium and long term to do what they have always done, but paid with a remuneration. A legal support service that aims at reduction, because the access barriers for this population are very high. So we want to accompany them so that they can have appointments, have access to services, undergo surgery, different services that have always been difficult for them to have access to. So this aims at reduction. And the cultural transformation service that is done within the home for the recognition of the importance of the care work and the contribution of that care work in the home economy. That contributes to redistribution, so that there is a more fair redistribution of care work within the home. Here we can see how we have structured the implementation of the program. Bogota is very large. We have implemented the system in cycles 1 and 2, have been implemented in 2 big territories. We have finished. We are about to start the 3rd and 4th cycle to conclude in December this year. So which is the innovation here in this program? The innovation is to reach with highly qualified services to the home in order to work with the people with disabilities, in order for them to be more independent and autonomous. So there is a reduction of the care time. But in parallel, the idea is to work in empowering the female caretakers to reconnect with their dreams, their life projects that have been delayed for a long time. The number one challenge of this program is to implement specialized actions that shall reach in a comprehensive way to solve the problems of the family. So we have to analyze the situation first in order to arrive in an assertive way to meet the needs of the family. So we are going to skip that. Next one. What's the impact based on the 3 pillars of the care system? Regarding recognition, 81% of the female caretakers expressed that the recognition of their care work increased. 72% considered that it contributed to the improvement of their self-care. Now they are more concerned about themselves, their health, their look, in spending more time on themselves. And also the certification, that is having that certificate that allows them to work in the future, well, positions them in a different way. And there is a high recognition that is, what I do is worthwhile, so much so that an entity certifies me. Regarding redistribution, 48% of the people with disability increase their levels of independency and autonomy. This was identified as from the implementation of the Hodas and Barthel scale. The primary redistribution was done between the caretaker and the person with disability, because there is more responsibility by the person that needs care. Regarding the reduction of the overburden, 50% of the caretakers reduce the level of overburden of unpaid work. This as from the implementation of the Sarit scale. let's skip this one. We are going to skip this one because we are short of time. What are the challenges and solutions? A fundamental challenge was to address a scattered population located in 19 locations. For that, we implemented the system in a staged way and in cycles. Bogota receives population from different cities from the country that come with their cultures, their specific characteristics. So we analyzed the reality, the situations in order to meet those needs, reach the caretakers of the 14%. We really focused and we defined entry criteria and priorities so that the population could have access to the program, and also to provide simultaneous services. There was an exercise of articulation in order to avoid the saturation of the family with so many services received by the home. And something very important, to count with permanent information during the implementation and be able to present results. We designed and implemented a monitoring and follow-up system, a sound one that allows us to have information in real time, almost. How is it that you generate partnerships? This is important. The participation in the district and local articulation tables, in the participation spaces. Here we see the intervention of the entities that are part of the district, the different sectors, the civil society. So to do follow-up of the implementation of the system, proposing new initiatives, see how this can work better, the communication of the program, the presentation of results, to promote the participation of academia and the private sector. This is fundamental. There is a challenge now that the private sector shall be able to provide employability that is also important and necessary for this population that are part of our system. And also to come with the support to communicate the results and the experiences, the lessons learned. Which are the upcoming steps? We have 3 steps in the short and medium term to implement the 2 remaining cycles. To finish by late 2024, we are working on the design and the implementation of a pilot, precisely because this service to go door to door is very costly. We want to have an intermediate system where we implement a quality program for caretakers and people with disability in the block, and to communicate the results of the experiences learned, the lessons learned, the results of the cycles. We are doing an impact assessment also to provide those results to the cities, the entities, in order to work in a more articulated fashion and to see the virtues of this program. And the challenges that we have ahead: 3, to move forward in the interinstitutional articulation, to coordinate actions for the care for the person of disability and also the caretaker. We expect for this administration, the next administration, we are in a transition. The administration started this year. The Secretariat of Women will be the guide to cross-cut the differential and gender approach so that all the services contribute to the empowerment and work with the caretakers to strengthen intersectorial coordination. It is done, but it is important to keep on working in this direction in order to offer comprehensive solutions for the caretakers and the people that need care. And something that is very important, to propose that this initiative shall be included in the public agenda so that it does not depend on the political will, and in this way we can continue and guarantee the sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to hear more about Bogota and the care work that you're doing. I think a really key takeaway that you just mentioned is how to include this care agenda at the public agenda level in terms of public participation and so on, so that it doesn't depend on political will but can continue across cycles. And I think Bogota is a really great example of how that's been done. I'm going to hand to Veronique, who has a question for Claudia now about Bogota. Over to you, Veronique.
Yes, sure. I think that this action is very interesting, especially the follow-up. I was relieved to see that making this part of a public policy and a piece of legislation so that it doesn't depend of political will whenever elections make politicians change in power. For us, that really makes the difference, the fact that it should be part of the legislation, you know, and that the fact that the caregivers exist and that we need to ascribe value to them and that we should give them a better status through training, through recognition, and through their employability, the fact that they should be able to get jobs. Well, you were talking about remuneration or compensation. I would like to know more about this. These women that are part of this project, they are not compensated for their work. So do you have some kind of compensation plan for these women that work at this as these caregivers?
No, remuneration is something that is being discussed countrywide to see how we can compensate them. What we are currently doing with our care system is to work with female caregivers and family members so as to train them, so as to prepare them for this work and to articulate with current employment opportunities, so that our approach is more comprehensive, not only focused on the needs that we see, but also to ensure that these people can access other opportunities and improve their quality of life.
Yes, I fully agree. And I think that this approach with the different means, different approaches, in Geneva, we have 600,000 people. So of course, it's not the same size. And as a result, we have a policy that may be easier to implement than to do it in such a big city as Bogota. But we are fully convinced that directly compensating the caregivers is not a solution, at least in our view.
Yes, it would be very costly to remunerate them economically, financially. But this is a project that is being studied at a country level. Maybe it takes place or not, but we at least know that this won't be sustainable in the long term permanently. So we need to find other alternatives to provide solutions that contribute to improving their quality of life.
Yes, I agree completely. And if we calculate the hours provided by the caregivers, and if we provided the same remuneration as in the health system, it would be impossible here too. So I think that compensating them directly would cause a problem, I believe, at the level of the family dynamics that could create problems, because if they are paid directly to provide care for their father, for example, and other members of the family are not compensated. So we have the strong position of doing this other approach and other forms of support. Yes, we agree. That's great.
Thanks so much, Veronique and Claudia. I see we have one question in the chat, and it says, in Bogota, with 30% of the population being caretakers and many not having education beyond primary school, what specific challenges do these caretakers face in addressing resources and support?
Well, precisely in care blocks, one of the possibilities that we see is for them to get their primary or secondary school validated. And there's also an option to train these caretakers and to articulate that training with the offers that are in place in every locality from the private sector. So what we want to do is to connect these care workers through employment fairs, for instance, to get them trained on how to create a CV, how to prepare for an interview, how they can connect with an employer after this training is completed. This is a great challenge, and we're also working on that to provide them more opportunities for these care workers to get connected and to enter the productive sector, the paid market, let's say.
Thanks, Claudia. Veronique, a similar question for you. given that 1 person out of 4 in Switzerland is a caregiver, how does this high percentage impact the overall social and economic fabric for the country? Very interesting questions, Chava.
So 1 person on 4, of course, that provide this caregiving is mostly provided to people who are retired or are elderly. And of course, this affects the retirement system, of course. So not everybody needs financial support, of course. But as opposed to Bogota, in the caregiving population, we have 1 person over 4, but it's only 56% of women. So in recent years, we have more men who are caregivers, which is a very good thing. And in the last years, in recent years, also professional activities, and there are certain arrangements that are made with work. So I think that in a way, we have a possibility through this to accompany caregivers through different ways and to facilitate access to services provided. We also have structures that support structures, in addition to the ones that I described, also focused on mental disabilities and mental health problems. So I think it seems like a lot of people, but actually it's not always caregivers that are long-term caregivers. Yes, it may be for a specific period of time. We have 1 out of 4, but we have people who provide that care for a limited period of time.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask a very cheeky last quick question. And I ask you to be very brief, and then I will have 2 minutes of wrap up where I'll also address Chava's last question about the role of international organizations. So my question for both of you, and in 1 or 2 sentences, is what key advice would you give to another city or local government who wants to start integrating a care lens into their city policy and doesn't know where to start? Big question. If you can answer in 1 sentence, where would they start? Thank you.
Well, the main thing for me would be to identify the group that they want to reach, the population they want to reach. They need to have the data, the numbers on how to implement this and what are the needs of that population group to articulate everything better. And it's also important to work with partners because they help in this regard, right? To have this kind of webinars, share experiences, present results, and motivate local governments to bet on these initiatives that are critical and that contribute to improving the quality of life, not only of households, but also of the population and the city in general. Thank you.
Yes, I agree completely with my colleague. This is essential, but I think that what I would focus on first is coordination. We have realized that there are many projects, there are many different approaches or systems that are implemented by small associations, yes, and things that make a lot of sense. So some other institutions are not aware of what these small associations are doing. So I think that once we have identified the population and we have a project, we have to understand and we have to really see what exists already, existing facilities, yes, and put them in contact one with the other. The identified population is essential, of course, but we must also identify what we are doing, what is being done already, so that we can build on that instead of doubling efforts. Very oftentimes, things are reinvented instead of profiting or leveraging the existing experience. And maybe they're not highly used because there is no information circulating and other institutions are not aware. So I think that information, coordination, and of course, identification of the target population.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Veronique and Claudia. That was really, really insightful. Coordination between different groups, understanding the problem, what exists already, working with what we've already got in cities, the importance of data. Really, really useful and impactful to go forward with, I think. To answer the question of then what can networks like Metropolis do? So as I mentioned in the beginning, 3 ways that we're supporting cities and the care agenda more globally is in terms of promoting debates and awareness. So participating in exchanges like this, where we can raise the voices of cities so that there's that opportunity to cross-pollinate between cities, and also in terms of campaigns. There's also, we're doing more intimate exchanges. We at the moment have something called a Solutions Lab, which is next month and online and in person. We're hosting events between a number of different cities in Latin America and the Middle East and Eurasia to share their different understandings of care, understand where to start, very much like this, but at a more ongoing level of workshops. So, and the goal there and what we're seeing here already with Veronique and Claudia is to see how we move from care policies and what cities are already doing and what infrastructure is already there into care systems that are more systemic and more sustainable, that have a gender perspective, and that can include all of society. And thirdly, what we're doing in terms of the care agenda and supporting cities is resource mobilization. And I think this is really key because cities often have limited budgets. We're working on developing a care fund for cities with donors, which will be launched very soon, hopefully, to support cities to then have the resources to develop their care systems. So that's some things that that networks can do, and to ensure that cities like Geneva and Bogota and the many others around the world that are doing really exciting and excellent work on care can be brought together to ensure we're sharing together, we're learning together. So a big thank you to Veronique, to Claudia, to UNDP. Very happy from Metropolis to be here. And have a good day and good afternoon, everyone.